So here's another actual unboxing, although I say that because I think someone has actually been into this one already, and that wasn't me. But in any event, this is one of my eBay job lot type auctions where I got a few of these at the same time. Now, this was quite an interesting one because I had to look at this quite closely, because initially I thought it was yet another Marquee Raider, which I seem to keep getting multiples of, but no. This is a Federation attack fighter. And I've actually just compared it with a Marquee Raider, and they are actually quite distinct. So I'll be quite interested to see what it says in the magazine about this one, because I'm guessing that somebody made a decision to make it look somewhat similar to the Marquee Raider, but perhaps by the same token completely different. So let's have a quick flick through this. This is issue 68. So, I mean, just the fact that it's a fighter is deeply unusual, because generally speaking, in the Star Trek series, what we see is capital ship engagements. We don't see fighters engaging one another. But in Deep Space Nine, of course, that changed, because Deep Space Nine had CGI, so things like that became easier. And we saw the introduction of smaller, even Bajoran fighter craft, actually, because they weren't terribly sophisticated in terms of their space tech. So when they were going up against the Cardassians, they tended to use smaller craft. They were basically armed shuttles. And we do see a lot of shuttles that also have weapons, and have done over time as well. But beyond runabouts that have weapons bolted onto them, we get this. And this is actually an out-and-out Federation fighter, and we see them being used in waves in the Dominion War against larger ships to try and, sort of wear their shields down and so on. So crew of 2, length 25 meters, 24th century. And it's quite an imposing sort of aggressive-looking beastie. But I mean, they do seem to be made of glass, mind you. So it's got phaser emitters, photon torpedoes, and pulse cannons, apparently, which would be similar to what the Defiant uses. Top speed warp 9. I think they might be over-egging this slightly. But okay, if you say so. I suspect if it is warp 9, it's not warp 9 for very long. I mean, it is a small ship, so maybe you could go that far and that fast. I don't know, but it can be configured to fire a wide range of weaponry, apparently. Attack fighters were used on some Federation worlds as a line of defence. The Marquis managed to get their hands on many of these ships during their fight against the Cardassians. Yes, later squadrons of attack fighters fought in the Dominion War. But I don't know that we actually saw the Marquis using this one, because they had their own sort of brand of these. These vessels possess warp engines, while inboard warp nacelles were located between the main body of the ship and the wings. And you've got to question why they've got wings in space, but presumably these are also used as intra-atmospheric fighters, one assumes. Pulse cannons located in the wings, energy disruptors, whatever they're supposed to be, like Klingon disruptors, particle accelerators and photon torpedoes. Okay, interesting. I suppose the thing with these is, if you can imagine that most of the capital class Star Trek ships are dedicated to exploration. Maybe not the Klingons so much, but this is an out and out fighter, so it can probably cram more into it than would normally be the case. Oh, that's right. So they did have this one. Yeah, that was a Marquee ship. I wonder if is that the first time it was on screen? So the Marquis managed to get their hands on several attack fighters to help in the fight against the threat. That's very interesting. So maybe that was the first episode in which we actually saw one. Because I rather thought they were new for the Dominion War, but I think I stand corrected there. That's interesting. The wing provided added stability for extreme flight manoeuvres, making it hard to target in combat situations, if you say so. That's it being used in a sort of fleet situation there in the Dominion War. Interesting. Nice schematic layout. I say the magazines are always good value in this sense because you do get a lot of detail from it. So it looks like then it was a model. That looks like it was a model originally. So let's have a look. As TNG drew to an end, the producers wanted to set up the backstory for Voyager, so the Marquis made appearances on both TNG and DS9. As a result, the fighter made appearances on both shows in the May of 1994. Alright, okay. The Marquis fighter was one of several ships that was rebuilt in CG for the massive battle in DS9 and Sacrifice of Angels. Well, that's interesting. So it did start out as a physical model originally then, which is interesting. So we can compare and contrast that with the one that we now have in the box to the right here. Yeah, fighters were unusual for Star Trek, but it made sense for the Marquis to have them and for Starfleet to use them in the Battle of the Dominion. Well, yeah, I mean, you would throw pretty much everything you could at when you're fighting for survival, of course. And this is dealing with things getting digitised here. It's a Galaxy class handing out a pasting to a galore there. That's very cool. So it's like they actually had sort of placeholders for what was going to come in the render afterwards. That's clever. No, that's interesting. It's always nice to get the magazines. You don't always when you're buying off eBay and so on, but it's nice when you do get them. I'll probably have a little read of that actually at some point. I think that'll be quite interesting. Cool. Okay, let's get into the model now. But the magazines are very much a part and parcel of, the Eaglemoss experience, if you will. So interesting. It's got a much longer lineage than I would have been able to tell you about had I not got the magazine with it. So that was quite useful in that sense. Yeah, she's quite plasticky, quite light for an Eaglemoss model. That I don't know. Maybe the wings are a bit metal actually, but she's very light. I mean, in fairness, she is very, very thin. So it may just be that there is more metal to it than I think, but it's just thin, so it doesn't feel as heavy as other models would do. But it's obviously very well done in terms of the detailing you can see there on the wings, and the sort of the paint job's quite nice as well because it's not completely uniform. So it looks like it's seen a little bit of action in its time. I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of the sort of the actual design. It looks a little bit like a bit of a kit bash kind of. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was. But I come from an era, you see, where we had like the Buck Rogers Starfighter and the Vipers. So I have very high standards when it comes to fighter craft, and this looks not. I don't know. Maybe it's too complicated. I don't know. I suppose because it's Trek, they're trying to go for a sensible amount of realism in terms of comparison with the capital ships. So they're trying to go for more detail rather than less, I guess, is perhaps the long and the short of it. The now familiar rustling of me getting the stand out. A lot of these boxes are very unique actually. That's got a funny way of keeping everything in it. I'm guessing that can't be right. I just have to go, yeah. Okay, it sits on its stand very, very nicely. I like that. So there she is. Yeah, it's cool. It's another little. I think if you would have got the Mackie Raider is more impressive. I think there's more structure and it's just bigger and more interesting basically. But it's not a bad little ship. Not a bad little ship for what I wasn't paying for it. So that's all good. So that is a Federation attack fighter, and I will move on to the next. Cheers for now.